We turn now to our political panel to unpack the news of the week. Amy Walter is the national editor at the Cook Political Report. Jeffrey Goldberg is the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. We're also joined by Slate Magazine's chief political correspondent and CBS News political analyst Jamelle Bouie. And Ben Domenech is the founder and editor of The Federalist. Before we get to policy, Ben, I want to ask you a question about Senator McCain, who's your father-in-law. How's he doing?
Well, John, I'm happy to say that he's doing well. The truth is that, as anyone knows whose family has battled cancer or any significant disease, that oftentimes there are side effects to treatment that you have. The senator's been through a round of chemo, and he went and was hospitalized this week at Walter Reed. Our thanks to the doctors at NIH and Walter Reed who've been treating him. He is doing well. He is in good spirits, and he's looking forward to heading back home to Arizona for the holidays. Our thanks to everyone who has been sending thoughts and prayers to the senator this week. We greatly appreciate it, and he remains one of the toughest men on the face of the earth, as you know.
That we know. So we'll send him again. Our thoughts and prayers to him and to the whole family.
Thank you.
So thank you. All right. So now to this week, let's start with the tax bill. Jeffrey, it's going to pass. It's going to get signed by the president unless something really crazy happens. So,
which is not impossible in this America. But
right.
You're right. It's going to probably pass.
That's right. And so give us your sense of that, what that means.
Well, I mean, I think in a broadest political sense, I think that this takes Donald Trump's pretty bad year and might move it into the not bad category in the following sense. He started his term, his first year, with a Supreme Court victory. He might end it with a tax cut victory, a tax plan victory. It's a legislative victory. It might not be popular with a broad swath of Americans, but it counts as a victory. ISIS, by the way, is on its back foot in Iraq and Syria. If we didn't have all of the noise and craziness, the Russia investigation, the early morning tweeting, all of the race baiting and everything else that's been going on, you would look at this year and say, you know what? Not the worst year for a first-year president. It's very interesting to think about it in those terms.
Yeah, and especially on the economy, which is the economy is doing very well. People are feeling better about it. The Secretary of the Treasury came on and talked about people's 401ks improving. All of that is true, and yet none of that is translating the way it normally translates to a president, which is if the economy is doing well, usually the party in power, their approval ratings do well. And so figuring out where that all stands, as Jeffrey pointed out, is really about the fact that are voters right now going to focus on the economy that they feel is doing better, or they personally are doing better, or are they focusing on the things about the president, his temperament, his behavior that they don't like? Right now they're focusing, politically at least, much more on what they don't like about the president than what they do like about the economy.
It is fascinating to watch the president who ran against Wall Street in part talking about the health of the stock market. Jamelle, the polling for this tax bill is not good. Does Senator McConnell's argument is it's going to get better once people start feeling this tax cut. Do you buy that argument?
I'm not sure that I do. That reminds me quite a bit of the Democratic Party's argument in the run-up to passing the Affordable Care Act, that once voters understood the benefits they got, they would like the bill. And as it turned out, it took a good 3 or 4 or 5 years before the public was ever positive about that law. And they largely became positive about that law because of the prospect of losing that law and losing specifically the Medicaid expansion. And there's, although the Republican tax bill does deliver some benefits, it doesn't deliver anything as concrete as something like the Medicaid expansion did that might create that same kind of bond with voters. And if you look at polling so far, even suburban voters, the kinds of people who you think would support this kind of tax policy, are skeptical about it. So I'm not sure. I appreciate Senator McConnell's optimism, but I'm not sure it's going to actually play out that way.
Ben, let me get your thoughts more generally, but also kind of playing off of what Jamelle was saying. Senator Sanders just said that basically his message is corporate taxes are going up if Democrats get in control. How do you think that plays in this context?
I think Republicans are actually going to be very confident running on this measure as sort of their key signature legislative success in 2018, I think that you will see a tick up in terms of people's attitude towards it once they actually see their paychecks go up. You know, one of the things about this in terms of how unpopular it is that when you simply get past the initial numbers, it's that people think that they're not going to benefit from it, that they're not going to see a benefit, that their taxes are actually going to go up and not down. I think that when people see their paychecks actually have more money in them, they're going to have a more positive attitude towards it. But the simple fact is that Republicans want to be talking about this. Democrats are going to be talking about getting rid of this president and his unpopular policies. They're going to be so many different Democrats and frankly base forces who are pushing Democrats towards turning this into an impeachment election where they're going to be getting this president out of office. And I think it's actually going to be difficult because the Democratic leadership would much prefer to be talking about, well, look at what he just gave to corporations and things along those lines. Nancy Pelosi's lines about this being an apocalyptic, end of the world sort of tax scenario, I think are something that would actually cater to what they would like to be talking about. Instead, the base of the Democratic Party is going to drive this into a much more, I think, significant and extreme direction.
It does just seem, though, that the Republicans have a hard lift here, which is it is impossible not to say that the greatest beneficiary in this plan, the corporations.
Yes.
If you believe the corporations are people, then people are benefiting. If you don't, the Democrats have a very potent weapon, and I don't know. I mean, it will take time to get people around to this, but I don't know if you can ever get around to this because that is the top line observation.
And,
ahead,
just to Amy's point from earlier, all of this is interacting in an environment where voters are quite angry at the president's behavior. So even if there are material benefits from the tax bill, there's no guarantee that that will interact with voter attitudes in a way to produce a political benefit for the Republican Party.
And Amy, what about the Democrats seizing this moment, the ability, obviously, that they haven't been able to stop it through Congress, but as a political matter, to Ben's point, I mean, this used to be the bread and butter of the Democratic Party, how to talk to working people.
Right.
They've got some ammunition they could use here. What's your assessment on their ability to actually use it to make a case to people who already they've talked to, about income inequality over all these years?
Right. The best thing that Democrats have going for them right now is that they're not in the White House. And they are the party of the opposition. It's so much easier to be the party of opposition than to be the party actually making policy. And what we found, especially in these midterm or early midterm elections and special elections, is that what the party has struggled with for the last 8 years in the era of Obama was getting their base, that Obama electorate, excited and energized. Voters of color and younger voters. They couldn't do it when Obama was in the White House. Hillary Clinton couldn't do it. You know who's turning out the Obama coalition? Donald Trump. Donald Trump personally is a great motivator. And to the point about whether they can talk about these issues, I think they make I think we're going to see this over and over again. The point you made about thousands of lobbyists worked on this bill, tax cuts for corporate America, whether people are feeling it or not, I think becomes less important than the overall argument that this president and Republicans said they were going to help the working people. This is really the same old helping corporations. And again, if the issue was, do I feel it in my paycheck? The biggest group of people that are souring on the president live in suburban America. Their 401ks are doing great right now. Right. So if it were really just about the economy, they would be on board.
The biggest question heading into 2018, I think, is whether there is a learning curve in the White House.
Yes.
If he comes out of this realizing, wait, I got an actual traditional political Republican victory, and learns to get out of his own way in 2018, then he's doing pretty well heading into the midterms. But this is Donald Trump we're talking about, so there's no guarantee that there's a learning curve and that he'll return to form, even with proof that behaving in a traditional way actually has benefit.
And you saw that in Alabama, in the sense that you have, to Amy's point, a candidate in Doug Jones who achieves more than 90% of what Hillary Clinton achieved in Alabama, and a candidate in Roy Moore who got less than 50% of what Donald Trump achieved. The truth is that Trump, since he got into the White House, has effectively been offering his voters circuses without the bread. He's been giving them the same level of entertainment that they experienced during the 2016 election without actually delivering on a lot of his populist promises when it came to shifting the way that the Republican Party would prioritize things. And I think you see that totally with this tax bill. This is a very traditional Republican approach. It's not a breakaway from the kind of approach that you might have seen under a President Jeb Bush. And that's something that satisfies Mitch McConnell, satisfies Republican donors, but is not necessarily going to satisfy the same voters who said that Donald Trump was the kind of shift they wanted to see in the GOP.
But what's interesting is that in Alabama, the voters who turned out for Roy Moore are the voters who are this working class populist base. They turned out for Roy Moore. The ones who didn't are these suburban voters. They're the ones who support completely collapse. And so I think there is an interesting question here of the degree to which the material circumstances of these white suburban voters in places like Alabama and Virginia, we'll see where else next year, seems to not matter as much for their political choices, that they're angry at Donald Trump for reasons that don't have anything to do with how they're doing in the pocketbook.
Right. And so, Amy, could we have basically a policy-free 2018, which would be a disaster? Because for Democrats, they want to drive down those suburban numbers, which means reminding everybody of the most outrageous thing the president did recently, and because the base of the Democratic Party gets energized, as you already argued. So don't they want to basically keep the focus entirely on Donald Trump?
They can make it on Donald Trump, but really they don't have to talk to their base and remind them why they don't like Donald Trump. The base is already pretty clear about how they feel about him. But it's making the case that the policies that the administration, that Republicans in Congress have passed have been out of step with mainstream, whatever they want, however they want to address it, whether it's the focus on corporate tax cuts, whether it's on the administration and the changes that have been made on issues like the environment, labor standards, et cetera. You can kind of go down the list. It's been conservatives should be happy. They've gotten a great agenda through, conservative judges getting through, regulatory reform, rolling back a lot of Obama era.
Regulatory reform is the revolution here. Nobody's talking about because of the circuses, but they're moving their agenda in a big way.
The one thing I do also want to say is that the focus so much for the president, we saw a story today that the president's going to go out and do more of these rallies in 2018. The challenge for him is not getting those people in the rallies to vote for him. The challenge is to get the people who never showed up at the rallies but ultimately voted for him to continue to vote for him. Those people who were reluctant Trump voters, they didn't necessarily like him in 2016, but they disliked Hillary Clinton more. They thought he was the change candidate, she was the status quo. Those are the folks that are sour and souring on the president. So the number of rallies he does and keeping that base energized isn't the challenge. The challenge, to Jeffrey's point, is going back to those people who were reluctant Trump supporters, but who want to see progress made without all the other drama.
The people Jamelle said were souring in Alabama. Ben, a Republican I talked to this week in assessing Alabama, said, we don't think we're going to have anybody who has been credibly accused of, sexual assault on a child in any other Republican race. So, in other words, let's not overread Alabama. That makes sense to me.
Well, it does make sense to me too, John. But I think, honestly, Republicans in the Senate were breathing a sigh of relief after Alabama. They did not want to be dealing with Roy Moore, particularly the concern that a lot of the different staffers there were expressing was, once he gets in here, will we ever be able to get rid of him? And they didn't feel like they could. But the situation, I think, here is one that deserves a little bit more attention than just, we're not going to nominate someone like that in another race, because there was a series of decisions that were made by a number of different Republican politicians along the way that led to Roy Moore. Mitch McConnell has been of the belief for a long time now that there are two kinds of politicians. There are politicians he likes, and there are politicians who will lose. This ignores the third kind, which is politicians he doesn't like who could win. The fact is that if McConnell had not parachuted in millions of dollars to nuke Mo Brooks, a conservative in the primary, that he very well could have been the nominee in this situation and might be a senator today. Now, he has his own health issues, of course, but I think this is one of those things where McConnell needs to look hard at sort of the challenges that are going to be at the fore in a lot of these different primaries, where he may need to make a choice about, do I have kind of a winnable candidate who's a conservative, or do I have someone who can't?
Okay, we're going to have to end it there, and we'll be right back in a moment.